for आत्मनिर्भरता।
ये आदत खतरे से खाली नहीं है और इसलिए प्रति पल जागरूक रहना पड़ता है आत्मनिर्भर होने के लिए।
Prime Minister Modi's India First roar on Independence Day. That is a big focus on India First.
So in his 12th address from the ramparts of the Red Fort, Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke for about 103 minutes. And his focus from national security to international relations, from economy to technology. He spoke of India's first indigenous semiconductor chip that is to be rolled out by the end of 2025 in just a couple of months from now. He paid rich tributes to the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, describing it as an organization that was dedicated to the betterment of the individual and the nation. Walter Anderson is an American political scientist and academic renowned for his decades-long study of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, currently a senior adjunct professor at the South Asian Studies at Johns Hopkins University. He joins me on India Today to talk more about the Prime Minister talking about the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh from the ramparts of the Red Fort and the political furor it led to. I'm Gaurav Sawant. As always, let's get started with the headlines on India First. Prime Minister Narendra Modi signals India's resolve in standing up to Trump's tariff tyranny, pledges he will not give up on the interests of India's farmers and fishermen. Inside scoop on government's GST reforms. Proposal sent to GST Council, 40% GST likely on tobacco products, but massive relief when it comes to healthcare and farm-related items. Politics escalates over Rahul Gandhi skipping Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address to the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort. BJP says absence sends a poor message on his commitment to national occasions, asks why the leader of opposition was so disoriented during the Congress party's event. Massive rescue operations underway in Kishtwar in Jammu and Kashmir after Tuesday's devastating cloudburst. The death toll sadly crosses 65, hundreds still missing. Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaks to Jammu Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah, assures him of all possible central assistance. All eyes on the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska. The outcome of discussion could impact even tariffs on India. From lauding the valor of India's armed forces during the recent Operation Sindoor, when terror was hit at source in Pakistan, including the headquarters of terror, to listing out the red lines, including keeping the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance and not falling for Pakistan's nuclear bogey, Prime Minister Narendra Modi today gave out his vision for Naya Bharat and the roadmap for Viksit Bharat, or a developed India, by 2047, the 100th year of India's independence. A Bharat that would be Atmanirbhar, or self-reliant, not just in defense, which he said held India in good stead, but also in technology, like making that semiconductor chip in India, the first that would roll out by end 2025. This was the mantra to ensure that India would not buckle under global pressure being mounted from different sides. Atmanirbhar route for Viksit Bharat.
Prime Minister Modi's big Atmanirbhar defence roar from the ramparts of Red Fort. Taking a cue from the Battle of Kurukshetra and a day ahead of Janmashtami, Prime Minister Modi announced the launch of Sudarshan Chakra, an indigenous weapons system. A Suraksha Kavach with precision counter-strike capabilities in the next 10 years, by 2035.
अब देश सुदर्शन चक्र मिशन लॉन्च करेगा। ये मिशन सुदर्शन चक्र एक पावरफुल वेपन सिस्टम दुश्मन के हमले को न्यूट्रलाइज तो करेगा ही करेगा, लेकिन कई गुना ज्यादा दुश्मन पर हिट बैक करेगा।
A fully modern system with its research, development and manufacturing done entirely in India, symbolic of the precision and power of a Sudarshan Chakra. A state-of-the-art weapon system enabling our forces to both thwart enemy aggression and deliver powerful retaliation. Prime Minister Modi hailed Operation Sindoor, launched in retaliation for the Pahalgam massacre, asserted Pak terror got a blow beyond their imagination.
सैकड़ों किलोमीटर दुश्मन की धरती पर घुस करके आतंकी हेडक्वार्टर्स को मिट्टी में मिला दिया, आतंकी इमारतों को खंडहर बना दिया। पाकिस्तान की नींद अभी भी उड़ी हुई है।
The call for a Sudarshan Chakra was the headline in the first Independence Day address after Operation Sindoor. Hailing India's befitting reply to Pakistan's cowardly attack on innocent tourists in Pahalgam, Modi did not mince his words, making it clear once again that India will not tolerate any nuclear threat from Pakistan.
भारत ने तय कर लिया है कि न्यूक्लियर की धमकियों को अब हम सहने वाले नहीं हैं। न्यूक्लियर ब्लैकमेल लंबे अरसे से चलाया, अब वो ब्लैकमेल नहीं सहा जाएगा। मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों,
Prime Minister Modi took the Atmanirbhar defence push a notch higher by announcing that the heart of India's fighter jets, the engines, will be made in India.
आज मेरा लाल किले की प्राचीर से मेरे देश के युवा वैज्ञानिकों को, मेरे टैलेंटेड यूथ को, मेरे इंजीनियर्स को और प्रोफेशनल्स को और सरकार के हर विभागों को भी मेरा आह्वान है, क्या हमारा अपना मेड इन इंडिया फाइटर जेट्स के लिए जेट इंजन हमारा होना चाहिए कि नहीं होना चाहिए?
But it wasn't just external security that was the focus of the Prime Minister, but internal security as well. Prime Minister Modi talked tough on infiltration in India, says infiltrators snatching the livelihood of the youth, and announced the setting up of a high-powered demographic mission to deal with the challenge.
भारत का घुसपैठिए मेरे देश के नौजवानों की रोजी रोटी छीन रहे हैं। एक घुसपैठिए मेरे देश की बहन बेटियों को निशाना बना रहे हैं। ये बर्दाश्त नहीं होगा। ये घुसपैठिए भोले भाले आदिवासियों को भ्रमित करके उनकी जमीनों पर कब्जा कर रहे हैं। ये देश सहन नहीं करेगा। भारत माता की।
A record-breaking Independence Day address and a strong push for India's Suraksha. Bureau Report, India Today.
वंदे। बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद।
So let's decode Prime Minister Narendra Modi's 103-minute long address from the ramparts of the Red Fort on the journey for Atmanirbhar Bharat and a Viksit Bharat by 2047. Joining me on this special 79th Independence Day special broadcast is Lieutenant General S.L. Narasimhan. He is a former member of the National Security Advisory Board and former defense attaché in the Embassy of India in China, has commanded a corps in the Northeast. Ambassador K.C. Singh is former secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, former ambassador. Professor Andrew Latham is a distinguished scholar of international security and strategic studies, joins us on this broadcast, as does Sandeep Punithan, senior journalist, and my colleague. General Narasimhan, the Prime Minister spoke of India exposing Pakistan's nuclear bogey, words to the effect that we will not tolerate their nuclear threats or distinguish between terrorists and their sponsors. He spoke of precision strikes into enemy territory, showed our aggressive stance to cross-border terrorism during Operation Sindoor. Your appreciation of the message the Prime Minister was trying to send out, some of what he said had been said by him before.
Good evening, and thank you very much for getting me on your show. This is something which has been happening ever since 2016 onwards, when we did the surgical strikes. In 2019, we did the Balakot strike, and in 2025, of course, Operation Sindoor. So this is a, I would say, a step-by-step kind of a reaction to what Pakistan has been doing, and conveying the message very clearly that Pakistan has always been saying for the last about 25 years that, we have a nuclear weapon and so you can't do anything to us. So this bluff has been called. I have been saying that this bluff should be called, and this bluff has been called very clearly from 2016 onwards, and in 2025 much more clearly. The other thing that he talked about is on the defense against any kind of aerial attack, the Sudarshan Chakra that he talked about. That is going to be a major game changer in our defense of our territory. So what has happened in Sindoor is, you found the attack by missiles and drones. Now, this could extend to anything else. So we need to be very, very clear and very, very prepared to meet any kind of threat that could come. Please don't forget that Pakistan has just announced yesterday creation of a rocket force command. So that is again a thing that we need to take note of. So we need to be prepared, and the very fact that it is going to be indigenously produced is something which is of a great importance, and it is of a great pride and importance for us.
Okay, so let's talk about the Sudarshan Chakra, the shield, the kavach that the Prime Minister spoke of. Sandeep, before I bring in Professor Andrew Latham, this is not just like India's Iron Dome or, America's proposed Golden Dome. This is much more. This has a counter-strike capability. So this is going in line with India's policy of defensive offense or offensive defense, the way you may want to look at it. Explain this, Sandeep.
Absolutely, Gaurav. In fact, what the Prime Minister has outlined today, the Sudarshan Chakra, seems to be a ballistic missile defense plus. Now, we've heard of a BMD capability that India has been working on for more than 3 decades now. This has been a top priority for us ever since Pakistan acquired the M11 ballistic missiles from China in the 1990s, nearly 3 decades ago. And ever since, we've been trying to develop this BMD capability. Of course, some of that exists in the current form. We've seen it in Operation
Sindoor. Yeah.
Yes. Multi-tiered defense. And now what seems to be the Sudarshan Chakra would be to add several tiers to IACCS, which would be a ballistic missile defense system integrating indigenous missiles and radars with the IACCS, and also elements of the rocket force that India is proposed to add to this to completely negate Pakistan's edge. Pakistan's ballistic missiles are on TELs, transport erector launchers. This aims to be a missile shield of the kind that would shoot down several missiles of the kind that Pakistan fired. If you remember, Gaurav, during Operation Sindoor, there was at least one ballistic missile that Pakistan fired, which was intercepted near Sirsa. It was fired towards Delhi, it's believed. The Sudarshan Chakra would be a Raj system that would not only protect against such kind of ballistic missile attacks, but also launch counter attacks, the retaliatory strikes using our own hypersonic missiles and air-launched systems of the kind that we've seen during Operation Sindoor. So it's actually a system.
And what a journey we've covered, Sandeep and General Narasimhan. Before I bring in Professor Andrew Latham, during the Kargil War of 1999, India so desperately missed the ANTPQ-37 weapon locating radars that America had promised but did not deliver because of the post-Pokhran sanctions that were imposed on India, and the Pakistani counter-bombardment impacted us adversely. In a similar situation 25 years later, when India-America relations not at their best, India is much, much better prepared and now is talking about not just a defensive, but an offensive capability. General Narasimhan, I'll come to you, but I want to bring in Professor Andrew Latham and Ambassador K.C. Singh into this conversation. Professor Latham, what's the signal that you got from the Prime Minister's address from the ramparts of the Red Fort? His longest so far, 103 minutes. The longest so far was the last year, 2024. But the military signal and the diplomatic signal and the big push for Atmanirbhar or self-reliant India in manufacturing.
Yes, well, there's a number of themes there, one of which is the self-reliance. And despite the fact that those engines are going to be made in India, one of the questions that wasn't answered is who's going to make them? Will it be General Electric? Will it be an Indian firm? That remains to be seen. But still, the production is going to be onshored, to use an Americanism, onshored to India. With respect to the second set of issues having to do with India's grand strategy vis-a-vis Pakistan, I think it's clear that India has a no first use doctrine. Pakistan has a full spectrum deterrence doctrine, which means that Pakistan reserves the right to use nuclear weapons if they are being defeated in a conventional war. Now, that combination has proven to be stable in the sense that there have been multiple crises which have sometimes approached the nuclear threshold, but clearly have never exceeded the nuclear threshold. There's never been a nuclear exchange. India has been pushing... To the best of my knowledge, it's never even approached a nuclear threshold, but you may like to enlighten us. When, in your appreciation, did it reach the nuclear threshold, sir? We've had conventional conflicts many times. When did it reach a nuclear threshold? Well, India's doctrine has changed in the last year or so, maybe a few years before that. So India now says that we're not going to be deterred by Pakistani nuclear weapons. So Operation Sindoor is the obvious example. They've simply struck not only terrorist and militant sites, but Pakistani military infrastructure as well. And that invited a response, a retaliation, including, as you just pointed out, as somebody just pointed out, a ballistic missile strike on India. Who knows what was on the end of that ballistic missile? It was conventional, but it might have been nuclear. The big question here is, how do these various doctrinal and technological innovations affect stability? Are they likely to make the relationship less stable and more inclined to spiral into a nuclear exchange? Or are they going to have the impact of reinforcing stability so that the conflict will be at sub-nuclear levels forever, which is in everybody's interest, by the way, not just India and Pakistan. It will have impact on global climate. It will have all kinds of impacts beyond just those two countries. So I think that when Modi is making the speech, obviously it's for internal consumption, but he's signaling quite strongly that India is its nuclear doctrine and the technological underpinnings of that doctrine are evolving and shifting. And the question for us is, as observers, as analysts, is that going to contribute to stability, or is that going to make the likelihood of inadvertent nuclear war more likely?
Okay, but again, General Narasimhan, is this the nuclear bogey that the world falls for? 1999, I was covering the Kargil War. It was a sub-conventional conflict restricted to two sectors. It did not even escalate. And that was immediately after the nuclear test of 1998. This was in 1999. 2016, you've had surgical strikes. 2019, you've had Balakot airstrikes. When fighter jets crossed the line of control and hit across the international border, there was no escalation even to a full-fledged conventional war, let alone reaching the nuclear threshold. So, Pakistan's army chief in Tampa, Florida, may want to raise that nuclear bogey. There is no nuclear bogey. That's the point that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is trying to make through Operation Sindoor. It did not even result in escalation of conflict to full spectrum, let alone a nuclear conflict. General Narasimhan.
You see, absolutely, Gaurav. The issue that we need to keep in mind is if one side keeps threatening that I will use the nuclear weapon, will that lead to stability? I'm sure that will also not lead to stability. So the issue is that they should be put on caution to say that you do something which is drastic, you will get it back more than what you were expecting. And that is the message that the Prime Minister was wanting to give today. And I think it is the correct message to go. So that when Chief of Pakistan Army goes on to US and then says that we will take half the world down if we are going down. So what will the other half of the world going to do? Are they going to look for stability? So the issue that comes up is that Pakistan should be put on notice that you should not try anything drastic. If you do, you will get back more than double, more than triple of the same coin that you are trying to do. So this is something I think we need to convey very clearly, and that is what the Prime Minister did. As far as the doctrine is concerned, we maintain our doctrine of no first use, and that we are very clear. But the result of that particular doctrine lies in the clause that says that if there was any kind of nuclear threshold crossed on India, the retaliation is going to be massive. That is where I think that message should go back very clearly, and that is what probably the Prime Minister did today from the ramparts of Old Delhi.
Okay, before I bring in Sandeep, Professor McAllister, does the West fail to appreciate the nuances or this nuclear bogey? Because it was Pakistan's army chief who was in Tampa, Florida, who's reported to have said that if Pakistan faced an existential crisis, they will take half the world down with it. Admonishment should have come there for Pakistan, and there was none. What explains this attitude, if you'd like to analyze, the role of the West here?
Well, none of this is new to people who have been involved in nuclear issues in the West and in the Soviet Union and in China. I can boil it down to the danger of brinkmanship. The Pakistani general making those noises in Florida, he's trying to signal, but he's raising the stakes. And when Modi, I think, made a rational set of statements, to be sure, he's also signaling, but in a way that kind of raises the stakes. And, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sometimes rhymes, Mark Twain. And we look at the Cuban Missile Crisis, for example. We look at 1984, another crisis, Able Archer was the exercise which triggered that. We like to think that we are rational animals, and by and large, we generally speaking are, but irrationality is part of the human condition, and things can get out of control. And this signaling, this saber rattling, if you like, on both parts,
it's
really
actually
does
not on both parts, it's on the Pakistani part.
Oh, believe me, I think the primary culprit in this very much is the Pakistani government. But India's response also contributes to this. Even though it's rational and perfectly understandable, it also contributes to this brinkmanship and this spiral. And there needs to be a way to... Cooler heads need to prevail at the end of the day. And they have so far in that relationship. In 1999, they had both sides had detonated nuclear weapons, but they had no delivery systems. I mean, that's not really a case that even rhymes, let alone repeats. But since then, there have been times where it could have escalated. And as you pointed out, it didn't escalate. Cooler heads prevailed. Do you want to really roll the dice in perpetuity, hoping that cooler heads will always prevail as less cool heads are ramping up the signaling, developing new weapon systems, some of which may contribute to stability, some of which might undermine stability? If, for example, you have a perfect ballistic missile defense system in India, 5 minutes before you turn it on and basically neutralize Pakistan's nuclear arsenal, what's the rational thing for Islamabad to do? They're not going to sit on their hands.
Well, the rational thing that they did this time in Operation Sindoor, and if you go by what's happened on ground, on a bent knee, they sought ceasefire. Because we must keep in mind what's happened so far. Whether you look at what happened in 1971, Pakistan begged for a ceasefire. Of course, they had to surrender. When you look at every other operation that's happened, and let's go by history, instead of just thinking or wargaming that, it'll escalate to a nuclear spiral, Sandeep, What happened here? After India hit 11 air bases, took down 6 radars, threatened to take down more in case Pakistan escalated, Pakistan realized India could conventionally take down all their air bases and they wouldn't have an air force. On the 10th, Pakistan didn't have an air force that could fly. So if we were to just look at it dispassionately and rationally, Pakistan sought a ceasefire, did not even think of escalating it to the nuclear threshold because they knew the consequences would have been worse for them.
Absolutely, Gaurav. And you know what Pakistan has done over the last couple of decades, and this is no nuclear armed country has ever done this, is nuclear weapons enabled terrorism. It's NWET. It basically uses nuclear weapons as a shield to protect Pakistan's so-called death by 1,000 cuts. Use of terrorism as an instrument of state policy. Virtually, we've seen that happening after Kargil in Jammu and Kashmir, the parliament attack, Mumbai 26/11, the train bombings in Mumbai in 2006. There are endless instances of terrorism that Pakistan actors have perpetrated on Indian citizens. The choice was to either double down and take these blows and protect all your citizens and your cities by defending them with greater security thing, or the choice was to hit out and go and raise the cost of Pakistan's sponsorship of terror, which this government seems to have done, as General Narasimhan pointed out, very gradually. From 2016, it was shallow cross-border raids. In 2019, it was a single airstrike against a single camp. And in 2025, you've seen with Operation Sindoor, it was a mass targeting of Pakistani terrorist infrastructure, followed by air bases. And this possibly struck at the root of Pakistan's nuclear deterrence strategy, which is what has rattled them so much, and which is why Munir is making the kind of statements that he's been making in the last couple of months, because Pakistan completely was taken by surprise, Gaurav, on the 10th of May. We completely underestimated the importance of what happened on the 10th of May. This has never happened in the history of it's been 80 years since nuclear weapons were used on Hiroshima and
Second World War by the Americans.
Second World War, and this is the first time that one country has struck at another nuclear-armed country using the Air Force in such a devastating fashion, which is why Pakistan is rattled, because this carefully constructed strategy of nuclear weapons-enabled terrorism, Gaurav, which Pakistan has practiced for more than a quarter of a century, is finally unraveling. They are having to pay the bills for it. It's no longer a low-cost solution. It's a very high-cost, strategy for them. It's ruined their bases. It's destroyed them. It's changed India's strategy. It's become a proactive strategy now, where terrorism can no longer be used as an instrument of state policy, and nuclear blackmail can certainly not be allowed to happen. And that is what Pakistan is really, really frightened about. Their strategy is unraveling, and they are rattled, Gaurav.
And India wants to move forward on the Atmanirbhar Bharat route. Before I bring in Professor Latham, General Narasimhan, Professor Latham had raised a very important point. While we talk of that Atmanirbhar Bharat route, the Prime Minister also referred to Make in India jet engine. Now, while we aspire to make the jet engines at home, the Kaveri engine that we worked on so hard for the past so many decades, it's reached thus far and sadly no further. What's the road ahead? Because he said, "Hame Bharat mein banana chahiye. We should make a jet engine in India." But till that happens, and the Americans, untrustworthy after 1984, when our entire GE 404 campaign suffered, LCS suffered because of that after Pokhran tests, and unfortunately, GE 404 engines have been delayed once again by over 2 years. Some have they've pledged they're sending more. They haven't come in, General Narasimhan.
This is very true. In fact, if you look at the history of countries which wanted to become self-reliant as far as armed forces are concerned, aero engines has been one of the major problems. Even China is struggling with it, and it's just come up with the initial lot of engines which is powering their aircraft. The thing required is a focused kind of an approach to develop that engine indigenously. Kaveri engine, the problem with that was it didn't have enough thrust. So we should probably take the technology and then start working. That is one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is technology transfer from external sources to be made in India. Basically, a couple of things are actually required. One is the metallurgy. Second is the thermal dynamics. These two are the ones which are actually holding back. I think if we can overcome that, we should be able to produce them indigenously. So both the options are open at this point in time, and I'm sure both the options will be pursued. Kaveri engine, as you are aware, Gaurav and Sandeep, now it is being tried out to actually power the drones at this point in time.
Absolutely.
So some
Absolutely.
use is being made of Kaveri engines, but that has to be taken forward and see where it goes. I think both the approaches will be open to working.
And on a war footing. But Professor Latham, is the relationship with the United States, in your appreciation, right now facing very severe headwinds? Some in the United States, including the Treasury Secretary, warn of additional tariffs on India if there is no deal between Putin and Trump later today, and India insisting on this Atmanirbhar Bharat push the road ahead and no compromise with the interests of farmers, fishermen and animal husbandry workers.
I think this is a moment of turbulence. When I look at the longer term relationship and I look at the evolutionary trajectory of that relationship, I think it is natural for India and the United States to have a stronger, more balanced economic relationship and a much stronger geopolitical or strategic relationship. They have at least one common adversary, the People's Republic of China. They both have an interest in stabilizing the Indo-Pacific region and blunting China's attempts to dominate that region. Do they have differences? Yes, of course they do. Canada and the United States have differences as well. I mean, the countries have different national interests. Sometimes that generates friction. Right now, it's generating friction, and it's generating friction not so much because of India-United States relations, but this Russian war in Ukraine is really complicating things. Ultimately, there are. It needs to be underscored always that the most wealthy demographic in the United States is the Indian diaspora. And that wealth now is beginning to be translated into political influence. And it naturally, originally gravitated towards the Democratic Party, but under Trump, initially was beginning to migrate towards the Republican Party. And now what the things that Trump and his administration have been doing have stopped that migration and reversed it partly. But future Republican administrations are likely to try to reach out to that demographic again for domestic electoral purposes. And so that's something that has to be factored into the equation as well. I see 5-10 years from now, India and the US being close economic and strategic partners, and looking back on this moment as, oh, that was really unfortunate. How did we allow that to happen? Let's move on.
Let's move on. Let's sincerely hope, the two strong democracies are able to complement each other. But will they, or will there be more turbulence ahead? We will track that story very closely. It's always great to talk to you, General Narasimhan, Sandeep and Professor Latham for joining me here on this part of India First. Many thanks. I now want to switch focus to the other big point made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi from the ramparts of the Red Fort. Prime Minister Modi, in his Independence Day address to the nation, appreciated the role of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh in the past 100 years of the existence of the Sangh. The Prime Minister said that the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh is the world's largest NGO with a century-long history of devotion, selfless service, and they've worked for the betterment not just of the individual but also the nation. Rashtra Nirman, Vyakti ke Nirman se Rashtra ka Nirman is what the Prime Minister said. This was the first time in the past 12 years, and this was the Prime Minister's 12th address from the ramparts of the Red Fort, that he praised the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, and so wholesome in his praise. But this praise has ignited a massive political storm in our country, with the Congress party alleging that the RSS was absent from India's freedom struggle, and this should not have happened from the ramparts of the Red Fort. We get you more in this report.
12 years, 12 speeches, but not one word about the RSS until now. For the first time, Prime Minister Narendra Modi broke that silence, and not with a passing remark, but with a glowing tribute. Calling the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh one of the world's biggest NGOs, crediting it for nation building, saying it has served India for 100 years, and that he was honored to salute their service on Independence Day.
सेवा, समर्पण, संगठन और अप्रतिम अनुशासन ये जिसकी पहचान रही है, ऐसा राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ दुनिया का ये सबसे बड़ा एनजीओ है। एक प्रकार से 100 साल का उसका समर्पण का इतिहास है।
But that praise has set off a political firestorm. Both Congress MP Manikam Tagore and AIMIM chief OAC called this tribute an insult to freedom fighters. They accused the RSS of standing aloof from the independence struggle and of spreading division, not unity. Samajwadi Party chief Akhilesh Yadav hit out too, stating that the RSS was neither secular nor socialist.
संघ का और उनके परिवार के लोगों का जो संघ परिवार है उसका रास्ता सेकुलर और सोशलिस्ट नहीं है। ये मुंह से तो हैं स्वदेशी लेकिन मन से नहीं, मन से विदेशी हैं।
The words got sharper, the fight got personal.
It is unfortunate because the same RSS was banned by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. He has not just undermined one of India's foremost freedom fighters, Vallabhbhai Patel, who had banned the RSS. His attempts to legitimize it will fail because this is the same organization that inspired India's first terrorist to kill Mahatma Gandhi.
Nonetheless, the Prime Minister's effusive praise for the RSS has gone a long way in quashing rumours of a rift with the Sangh chief, even though it has come at the cost of a political firestorm. Bureau Report, India Today.
So the Prime Minister was wholesome in his praise for the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. Joining me now on this special broadcast is Walter Anderson. He's a very well-respected American academic and author. He's studied the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh for over 6 decades. He's also a former head of South Asia Studies, School of Advanced Studies at Johns Hopkins University. Mr. Anderson, welcome. How are you, sir? Your take on Prime Minister Narendra Modi describing the RSS as the world's largest NGO, highlighting its 100 years of selfless service to the nation from the ramparts of the Red Fort. In your view, sir, how significant is it for the Prime Minister of India to publicly acknowledge the role of the RSS, given that complex relationship that RSS has had with some of the past governments?
I listened to the speech when he got to the section praising the RSS. I was a little surprised because, as you say, this was the first time in one of these speeches that he has formally mentioned, not only mentioned, but praised the RSS. Now, the immediate question is, why did he decide to break new ground on this? I think there are a couple of reasons. One has to do with the elections that are coming up in West Bengal and Bihar, very important for the BJP. And as you know, in the last elections, national elections, the BJP did not do all that well. It didn't get a majority on its own. It needed allies to rule. Now, one of the reasons for that is many in the RSS sat on their hands during the election, because typically in the past, the RSS Swayamsevaks have worked both with the BJP and has sought to get out the vote on their behalf. They were much less so now in that. And in fact, if you want to see the differences, compare the national elections and then the following elections that came up in Haryana, where the RSS did support the BJP, and there they did quite well. So, I think that, you have national elections has something to do with it. Then there was something internal, because Nadda, the president of the BJP, had made a comment that, the BJP didn't necessarily need the RSS. And many people took that as an insult, which is why I think in the national elections, many of them sat on their hands rather than work very, very diligently. Okay. Well, the Prime Minister needs these elections coming up, and he needs all the support he can get. And of course, the RSS is a major factor in that.
So you've studied the RSS for over 50 years, for 60 years. Your reading of the Sangh, your reading of the Sangh, the Prime Minister described them as selfless workers. The Prime Minister described them as playing a very critical role from Vyakti ka Nirman, or, the development of an individual, to Rashtra ka Nirman, to the development of the nation.
Yes, he did that. One has to remember that the prime minister is a former full-time worker of the RSS. He's a former pracharak, so he knows it from the inside. And then, having read about his early youth, he looked at the RSS almost as a surrogate family. So he still has in his heart, I think, a considerable sensitive feeling for the RSS and what it has done. And I think that because the election and because they did badly, not badly, they still were able to form a government, but didn't do nearly as well as expected. That with these important state elections coming up, they need the BJP. And what better platform than the one he had today? I mean, you have the country listening, and you can be sure you've got the RSS pracharaks and the various RSS, senior figures and also in the various affiliated organizations, who are listening to what he has to say. And I'm sure they have taken a favorable view. In fact, I know that's the case because after that happened, I made some contacts and, at least my contacts were pleased as punch. That he
They were
said
pleased
this
as punch with the Prime Minister's reference. But
Yes.
explain the Sangh as you have studied it, as you have written about it. Can they swing elections? Can they ensure voters come to the election? Because ultimately, that is what is required. Beyond the lofty speeches, is to get that last voter to the booth. So, how does the RSS work in your view? Because they say we're a cultural organization.
Well, it's true. I mean, that has always been their argument ever since the ban, is that we are, in fact, a cultural organization. But in fact, they provide assistance to the BJP, as they do to the other some 100 affiliated organizations which they have, which means India's largest student group, its largest labor union, whose leadership is almost like the BJP, is almost all drawn from RSS backgrounds. So, you're not going to find much internal difference within the RSS. Now, the very fact the Prime Minister, I'm sure, realized that this was going to arouse a certain amount of controversy, which, as you noted, has aroused a certain amount of controversy. He was willing to take that chance, thinking that was not as significant. Now, to get your initial question, can the RSS throw elections? They can ensure that the BJP doesn't do as well, which is what happened in the last national elections. And so, in a sense, what he said indicates that he is concerned the Prime Minister is concerned by where things are going, for the country. And now we're not going to talk about the tariff issue. I have a couple of other interviews on the tariff issue that India has.
But I want to now come to the point, since you raised, you spoke of the controversy, you spoke of the opposition, the Congress termed the Prime Minister's comments most troubling, saying in their view it was a breach of the spirit of the constitution of a secular republic, and in their view a desperate attempt to appease the Sangh. Your thoughts on the criticism?
Well, I mean, this is not new. The criticism has been old, and the louder the criticism indicates that the more they're concerned about the influence of the RSS. In fact, in a sense, it's their, saying that the RSS, is a very important organization that has an important influence in the country's affairs. It does so. As to the issue of whether or not, it's a blow to secularism, the issue, if you look at the RSS, it has within it all brands of Hinduism, and it also has Christians and Muslims within it. And that has been true since the time of Deoras, one of the third Sudarshan Chakra of the RSS. So, it's from their perspective, it's not unusual. For those who know India, it's not all that unusual. And we'll see what happens in the elections. I'm sure now, in fact, the Prime Minister visited Nagpur for the first time when he was Prime Minister, was it last April? And he also said some very, very congratulatory things. And I think it's tempting to sort of, heal whatever wounds were created by the statement that Mr. Nadda made. And also the sense that somehow if they didn't respect the RSS and didn't think it was needed, okay, fine. We'll see what happens. And we
So
saw
before
what
I let
happened.
you go, I also want to ask you, by calling the RSS the biggest non-government organization that's engaged in selfless service and devotion to the nation and the individual, in your view, is the Prime Minister, because, you know, previous generations may have their view, some generations may have their view, is the Prime Minister, you know, opening an arena or opening a window so that the next generation, the younger lot, can know more about the RSS? And in your view, will this help reshape public perception and opinion?
It might. I'm not sure how much, because I'm not sure that was the objective, was to create a better opinion of the RSS. So it might have that. I think the opinion was actually directed to members of the BJP and the RSS, you know, and in fact, you know, it was say, you know, work with us, you know, as you have done in the past, and don't sit on your hands as you did, because it can hurt us, and hurting us could hurt you as well. So I think that was the objective.
Fair enough. Walt Anderson, for joining me here on India Today. Many thanks. I have breaking news that's coming in from Jammu and Kashmir, and we're getting a reaction from the Jammu Kashmir Chief Minister Omar Abdullah on the current situation in Kishtwar after the flash floods. The information that's coming in, the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir has now confirmed around 60 bodies have been recovered so far. This is the information that we're getting. 60 bodies have been recovered. The number of people who are missing is still being assessed, but this could be a high number. Relief and rescue operations are continuing non-stop since yesterday. The Chief Minister has also said we will inquire whether the administration could have taken any additional preventive measures when the Met Department had issued a warning and advised people not to venture out if not needed. So when that message was there, should the administration have been more proactive and not let such a large number of devotees gather at the base of the Machil Mata Yatra, at the base camp of that Yatra? The rescue operations, we are told, are currently underway. The Army, the National Disaster Response Force, the State Disaster Response Teams, police, administration, they are on ground. Workers of different political parties are also working on ground to assist the agencies. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the Union Home Minister Amit Shah, they've spoken to the Jammu and Kashmir Chief Minister. The centre has extended all possible help, and they've assured them whatever else is required will be given. And despite this inclement weather, as you can see in those images, rescue operations are still underway. Let's listen in to Omar Abdullah. I'll get you more on the story.
60 के आसपास कंफर्म्ड जो डेड बॉडीज हमें मिली हैं, और लापता लोगों की अभी सही तादाद जो है वो उसको हम फिलहाल असेस कर रहे हैं, लेकिन बहुत बड़ा हादसा हुआ है। और क्यों हुआ इसके पीछे भी अब हमें ये जब रेस्क्यू और रिलीफ का काम ख़त्म होगा तो इस पे भी हमें इंक्वायर करना होगा।
More breaking news coming in. The Russian President Vladimir Putin's special aircraft is expected to arrive in Alaska in a couple of hours from now. That's the information that's coming in. So Donald Trump is to meet the Russian president at the Anchorage Air Base. He will meet him at the air base. That's where the conversation will take place. We are told around midnight Indian Standard Time, which is 11 a.m. local time in Anchorage. That's where the conversation will take place. President Trump will greet him, is the information that Kremlin has just put out. Donald Trump is to meet President Putin at his aircraft. That's the information that's coming in. And I want to cut across to India Today's Rohit Sharma, who joins us live from Washington, D.C. on the story. Rohit, what's the buzz? Is there hope that this could pave the way for peace between Russia and Ukraine, or is this just an icebreaker of sorts?
Well, first thing first, Gaurav, happy Independence Day. Yes, there is definite hope. I think that's why President Trump is flying out to Alaska. And That's exactly why Vladimir Putin is coming to Alaska. But at the same time, I think it has been a very cautious approach by President Trump. He's playing this meeting down. He's not trying to get ahead of himself. He's taken into confidence Zelensky. He's taken into confidence the European Union. And he said there's a 25% chance that this meeting would not end up where it wants it to be. So, he's taking a very cautious approach. When he was speaking and gaggling with reporters on Air Force One, he talked about if he does not find the Russian president serious about it, he might end up sanctioning Russia more. He's talked about that he's seen that Vladimir Putin is traveling with a business delegation and that he would want to talk to him about it, but only if Russia makes progress. So there's a lot at stake here.
There's interesting that you mentioned...
feeling good meeting.
Okay, it's interesting that you mentioned that there could be additional sanctions on Russia, but you also have the Treasury Secretary who's warning India of additional sanctions, and this is rather unfortunate, but bring us more details on the thinking in the Trump administration there.
Well, look, I think President Trump himself has admitted that he believes that, sanctioning India is, sort of allowed for the Russians to understand what President Trump can do and, making them do this summit in Alaska. So I think that's a belief that they have. But President Trump on Air Force One has specifically said he's going to sanction the Russians. He did not talk about any other nation. So that's there. I think they believe the sanctions could work and possibly if they see that Russians they have good intentions and they really do want to end the war, which is what Vladimir Putin said a few days ago, I think we could see something positive. Another interesting thing, Gaurav, is that President Trump has also teased a trilateral if everything goes well. And he said he might end up staying in Alaska if things progress. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot of posturing, but at the same time, a very cautious approach from President Trump, who's known to be very pompous at times.
And at the same time, you have President Putin and his team. They are putting all facts out, very clearly saying, yes, we want to move forward, but it has to be just peace. It has to ensure that it's lasting peace. And who will be a signatory on that peace? Because according to them, President Zelensky is no longer authorized to be president of Ukraine after the end of his tenure. And there are so many aspects that we will continue to talk about. And Rohit will be tracking that story very, very closely. Rohit, for joining me here for the moment, many thanks. That is all I have time for on India First this evening. But 10 o'clock tonight and through the night, we will continue to get you updates here on India Today. Stay with us.
association with